I was watching on the webcam and it was quiet, so I turned it off.
For about 3 days.
Yeah.
And all these.
And then when I went downtown, there was some equipment out there.
Neither John nor
John
was
nobody said anything, so.
Fire the bomb. Just drop it back into the bubble. Just be done with
It will be great.
I can't convince you to come in.
Go past Lou's house and check her out her project.
I've seen it, but I haven't figured out. Has she started doing it? They've done it for her, they just cut the trees and put the gravel in. Nobody emphasizes gonna want to build anything. And she knows everybody else.
I think she's showing
That
three-story B and B. That new building is a three-story B and B.
Well,
Where?
At
your house.
Your house,
Oh, yeah.
The longer I go, the more I'm like, oh, maybe we don't want to put anything up there.
It sure has it nice and bright right out by there.
Wonderful. Yeah.
The last meeting.
Have your neighbors on the other side of the street said anything to you?
They already came down in the mail assembly.
Kurt was gonna be here, and I know Cindy's here
Yeah.
somewhere.
How about Howard?
They're out of, two Johns are out of
Mike told me
town.
he'd give them to me because
where's Hope?
he didn't want to talk to you.
Yeah, that's what I said.
He's up
Well, that's what
there.
I said. I'm smart enough to know
okay.
that.
Started, and the other one is down
Jeff
in
Hammer said, well, I'm
Montana or Wyoming.
And I wish I
No, he's in
Oregon.
Oregon.
And I was
Oregon.
going,
Yeah. They have a
I wish I
little
had
house
these
down there.
little toes that kind of drive by.
They're all the same.
Yeah.
They're all the
Homestead.
He's like outside the house. We're
Yeah, right beside the manhole covers by the building there. Wherever, I mean.
no.
As far as Mark and Kurt, thought Kurt was coming back, because he was in this morning.
He was in, he was
He
down
probably
yesterday.
will.
I thought he was coming.
And Cindy's here, so we'll wait for Cindy a minute and start.
Are those any sort of
There you
special
go.
material or just mild steel?
And somebody, they started out, I'm trying to remember how we got it. But somebody left over
They will have
pieces,
no questions
and
for
then
me.
what somebody did was, and I want to say it was the guy.
Oh, will it?
Heavy set.
Yeah, it's gonna be all my snide remarks and stuff.
Manager.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
And he welded them up for the first competition. And that was, and he did a very good job, and we just tacked them.
Is this everybody?
People started shooting them, and they started welding them.
That's right, we're over the day it turned out, however.
Like 8 by 4 or something. And so
Already?
two weld together this way and one on top.
But I saw hundreds of sandhill cranes go over this morning. Yeah.
I saw thousands of them yesterday. I thought they were gone.
Oh,
Way,
another
I
big
actually
group.
need a shed.
lot of Hummer activity.
Actually, they are right using the old Monroe.
Jody, I think everyone's here except maybe Kurt.
For all the poppers and stuff.
Yeah, I said we talked about.
Yeah, but I don't think it's.
I did not bring.
Oh, you did.
I didn't bring my.
She's got some.
Right, works for me. One percent. Much bigger.
You're excited about something.
Well, let's not overdo
Just a shed.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to Jody and to Steve and all the department heads, because this is really a nice job here, and I appreciate all your efforts and the little tidbits that you added that explain things for us. And Jody, I think you're going to lead us through.
What I was going to do was just briefly go through the budget and point out any major changes that happened, and stop me along the way if you have any questions. I'm going to refer some of my questions to department heads so they can talk about their budget a little bit. Steve, did you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, if I may. You know, we put the transmittal letter in, which is something we should be doing, and I'll do a better job than I did last year on it. couple things to point out. Number one, I did list the capital projects from last year, minus those that have already been funded, left them in the same order. The Assembly will have an opportunity to reprioritize or add or subtract, but our budget does call for having a capital improvement plan in there. So I did put that in there. The other thing is just more of a general comment, and you'll see this reflected in my statements in the document, which is, you know, we are, I think we're living in a world of a little less money flowing from the state. At least at this point, that's what we're hearing. And while this particular budget does not necessarily reflect that, I think it's going to be a bigger and bigger challenge in future years. I think it's going to be, you know, it's going to start with the enterprise funds having to become much, much more, you know, whether it's recapturing portions of depreciation. I'll use Power and Light as an example. You know, when's the last time Power and Light got a grant for anything? I mean, they have to self-fund themselves, and they got some really expensive stuff. You know, go try to, you know, replace a dozen poles, something bad happens. So I think in future budgets, it's going to be more and more, we're going to be looking a lot on recapturing portions of depreciation, especially in those areas that are going to have a hard time getting state funding. You know, you take the wastewater water system, where so many of our projects are loan driven, or at least percentage of loans, capturing some form of that money that we have matches available, and because we'll fast run up against our borrowing limit as far as what we can borrow and what we can't. So anyway, the long and short of it is, I think in the future budgets, Jody and I are probably going to be a lot more aggressive at saying, okay, here's some rules. Don't give us a budget unless it meets certain parameters as far as, you know, recapturing depreciation. We did it in the general fund this year, where we've put a contingency line item in of $90,000. The hope is that will lead down the road of trying to put money aside, keep the general fund balance high enough that, you know, this building someday is going to need work. And we've seen from the challenge associated with the police station and jail how much money that takes. We're going to have money to pull from. It's likely there'll be less state funding available for that. So again, I think Jody did a great job on this with the department heads, but my fear is down the road it's going to be even harder to do this. I think that was it, Jody, unless I said anything wrong. So
Okay.
Yours.
Okay, we're going to start with the general fund on page 5. It's the summary of the revenues and expenses. Does anyone need a copy? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And as Steve said before, we did put a contingency of $90,000 in this budget. We balanced the general fund budget to 0. Just a reminder that general fund is mainly comprised of property tax and sales tax revenue and grants. If you go to page 7, this is the revenues, starting the first page. You'll notice a little bit down the page, there's the new library GO bond is included in there for $105,000 is the first annual payment. And stop me if you see something else that I don't talk about that you want to talk about. For sales tax, you'll notice the increase from 2.7 million to 2.9. This is the 2.7 of this current year's plus the $141,000 that we predicted that becoming a borough is going to generate additional sales tax revenue for us. And the same with there's an additional $6,000 in the transient room tax revenue because of the borough. The last line of this page is the state revenue sharing. The state informed us we're going to receive $537,000 this year, and this is almost a $200,000 increase because of becoming a borough. So on the next page, there's nothing too out of the ordinary. There's the state PERS relief. You're going to see this in the general fund budget. You're going to see it in the enterprise funds budget. That is money that the state pays directly to our PERS retirement system. We don't actually get the money here. It's because of that unfunded liability that happened with the actuaries a few years ago. So our portion of PERS that we have to pay is 22%, and then the state makes payments on our behalf. But per GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, we have to book it as a revenue and an expense. So it's a wash basically, but it does increase the budget. It looks like it's bigger than really it is. I don't think I have anything else to talk about in revenues. The next page, page 11, for the Borough Assembly, we don't have budgeted anything for election expenses this year.
I noticed that.
Yeah, because of, and if you do decide to have a special election, we're gonna have to put money in for that.
And how much is that, Kathy? Is it 15?
Usually, no, it's anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000. I
Oh,
think,
okay.
yeah, for local election.
Can I jump in? One of the things some of you were involved in this. We, as part of the borough process, we did some kind of back of envelope discussion about, as property taxes and revenues go up, giving more money back to particularly the harbor and the fish tax. The goal was $50,000 a year, increasing over time. This budget does that. So the general fund is keeping, as of the moment, $50,000 less in raw fish tax. That'll be going directly to the harbor, because that's a change, something you need to be aware of. The other thing is, we told the school we would slowly ratchet up using $75,000 a year less in the secure rural schools timber receipts. In a sense, we did that this year, but we offset it by having to put in a capital project for $70,000 to fix the alarm systems down there. So we put it in and then promptly spent it on trying to get that. It's the only way we could get this balanced well enough and pay for that alarm system, which needs to be done. So.
And that was for the community gym. What, Donnie, you know a little bit.
Yeah, basically what has happened in the past is that the community gymnasium / aquatic center and the high school's systems, when the aquatic center was built, they don't talk to each other very well. And so because of that, just because an alarm goes off in the aquatic center doesn't necessarily mean that there's an alarm going off in the school. And so if there was a fire in the aquatic center, the school, which is connected to each other, doesn't know that there's a fire going on over there. And so this helps to announce and let 911 system know a little bit better about what is happening in the building, and is able to mark exactly where a fire is or some other problem that's happening. And so right now they're just not talking to each other very well.
Jody, I see that there's a $5,000 drop in ambulance fees. Why that chunk of change? That's on page 8.
Yes, actually, 2 years ago, we used to do our own ambulance billing, but my staff didn't really have time, and there's a lot of HIPAA things that you have to, so we actually outsourced it to a company called Omni Billing, and it was so high last year because they collected a lot of our past due bills, and I think they're continuing to do so this current year. And we're talking about increasing rates this next year, and when we go over that ordinance in the municipal code, we're going to look at that soon. But that's still being put together, so we haven't adjusted any new fees for that yet. Does anyone have any more questions about the assembly budget? The professional services is for the state lobbyists and half of the federal lobbyists. The other half is paid for by Power and Light and the harbor. Administration.
Jody, that one went down 4,000. What's the reasoning for that? Is it cheaper? The professional services.
I'm not sure what was in this current year's budget. There must have been something else.
Redistricting was charged to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that wasn't budgeted in the prior year when we got involved with redistricting, so it was charged to professional services line item.
Thanks, Kathy.
And we are budgeting for a raise for our Juno lobbyist. It's been, what, 6 years? 5 years? He's not increased, and so that is in there, going to 42,000 a year for Ray's firm to help us out in Juno.
And the assembly will still have to approve that before that happens, but we
Right.
put it in the
We just
budget.
put it in here because that has not, we don't have a new contract, but that'll happen in the middle of the year, that it'll be brought back to you folks to look at.
Administrator Steve or Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to talk about administration? It's pretty standard. On the next page, information services. That's our contracted IT help. We did budget for a few more iPads, and also in the small tools and equipment, we're budgeting for a new firewall. And you can see it's gone down considerably from 2 years ago when we had someone on staff that did it, and now that we contract out, saved the borough a lot of money.
And is that working really well?
It is, I think it's working really well. It takes a little to get used to. You know, everyone has to order their own computers and set up their own computers, but once you get them all plugged in, there's someone remotely that can get on your computer and set it all up, and just, it's a change, but I think I am great with it. I've heard some other good comments from other department heads too.
I just had my computer replaced, and I was a skeptic. And I was amazed. I came in early on a Monday, and my computer was all over the place, and he made a note that I'm setting your computer up, so very efficient.
Good.
And I was going to say, I also was a skeptic. We use a lot of computers, and I am very, very, very handicapped when it comes to technology. And it's like Jody said, it's different, but it's probably better. It's
Wonderful.
Challenge is really, I mean, what we saw was it is not having somebody that you can walk over and talk to is a negative. On the other hand, we can't afford to have the expertise that they do. So we can call them, and they've got a network guy and a software guy and a hardware guy, and we can't hire somebody that can be an expert on all of those things. And by doing this way, we have access to those experts. May take a little bit longer than having, but we have somebody that's a lot more knowledgeable, that specializes in each of those individual problems. What they've done on revamping our servers, we couldn't have, there's nobody here that could have done that. And you know, that makes a big difference in some of our costs. So it's, I think for the moment anyway, it's continuing to work pretty well for us.
So is it out of India?
No. Des Moines, Iowa, of all things.
We can understand.
Yeah.
which is like in check.
Yeah, no, actually, we're using Kurt, our utility billing company and financial software and everything that Jody and her staff use. The company that provides that is called PCS. And they, as part of their service, you can also contract with them to do remote IT support. So it's somebody we were already used to working with, and we work with on all of our other stuff as well. So they know our system and pretty well.
Yeah, there are just some things that they don't do, like, for example, setting up your iPads.
Yeah.
So that just takes a little more time, because you have a
Sure.
unskilled laborer working on it.
Yeah, and that's an example of having to deal with it. So.
Okay, page 17, the finance budget's my budget. I did budget $3,500 for office equipment. That's more file cabinets. I'm gonna replace the property tax file cabinets. They're probably as old as.
Before you go on, line item miscellaneous other charges
In admin,
Page.
on, on page 13.
that's Steve's,
Relocation.
yeah, he hasn't turned in his bill yet.
Okay, okay, because I was gonna say, that's a big chunk of change that we're just going, oh, and et cetera, et cetera. Got it.
Yeah, 17 file cabinets for me, and then we're gonna have to get some additional ones for the borough for all the new files that we were going to have for those. And the borough revenue that we're getting and the transition expenses, that is gonna be we're putting that in a special revenue fund at the very end of our budget. So we'll get to that at the very end of this meeting. The next page is attorney. None of the attorney's expenses for the borough conversion are coded to this. They're coded to that special revenue fund that I just mentioned. On page 21 and 23 is the police and jail. It's pretty standard. I didn't note anything for anything.
No, nothing significant. I didn't buy a new building.
No, we're working on it.
On page 25, the fire department. The fire department did budget $32,000 for machinery and equipment. And Jared's here for Sandy because she's out of town, and I was just wondering if you could note what those were for, Jared.
We've got $10,000 down for firefighter turnout gear, 5 sets of turnout gear. Turnout gear has to be replaced every 10 years per NFPA standard, and it also has to be replaced if you wear out the knees, elbows, or put any holes in it from wear and tear from training and fires. And so we try to, over time, budget a few sets every year to keep up with the wear and tear so that we don't run into a big 10-year issue at one time. So that's where 10,000 that is. We've got 13,000 plus for replacing hose. We put in a grant for that for about, I think we put in a grant for more than that, but we'd have no idea whether we're getting it. And if I remember what Ryan told me is they put in the budget for half of what he needs for this year on the chance that we don't get the grant. We'll at least be able to get half of what we're hoping for. If we get the grant, then hopefully that won't be an issue, but if we don't get the grant, we're gonna need that hose because it either doesn't match the hose testing or it gets wore out and has to be replaced over time. He's got a hose coupling press in there so that we can actually put, and that would be a new item, and that would be so that we can replace ends when they blow off. We don't presently have one, and when they blow off, we end up just buying a new hose. If we get the hose coupling press, we can actually put a new end back on, and we may be able to save money in the long run that way, but it's something that we've not had in the past for being able to put new ends on the hoses.
Is that just a banner? I haven't seen the hoses.
It would be whatever presses the end back on. They're put on with a press rather than a screw-on mechanism like they used to be in the old days.
I think I know what it is now. It's bronze or brass.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it presses down and hooks it on there. And so, because most of our failures happen where the hose meets the coupling, and then you end up with a perfectly good 50-foot of hose with no end on it.
Lure doesn't have that kind of?
Not for fire department.
Okay.
Not for fire hose. We also have SCBA brackets, which are the tanks for breathing air. We've got the new tanks. We don't have the brackets for them to fit in the trucks, and the brackets we currently have don't meet NFPA standard for what they call a collision test to hold the tanks intact in case of a collision, so they're not bouncing around inside the deal, and that's a $7,000 deal in order to fit these new tanks. They're a different size. The new tanks that we have now are a different size than the old tanks, and so we're actually going to have to replace the brackets, not only to hold the tanks, but to also meet the NFPA requirements. And the last thing we had was a $3,000 Honda pump to put on the tanker truck. The one we have was purchased prior to me joining the fire department, so it's over 25 years old. And yes, it still starts, it still runs, it just depends on how much time you want us trying to take to get it started. At 25 years, we've spent a large amount of time trying to get it started to pump water in the past, and I would really like to replace that so that we have a dependable piece of machinery to use when we need it.
Any more questions for Jared or, okay? Page 27, Public Works. There's a couple of capital outlays, yes?
Back up just a second here. That vehicle replacement for 82,000, what vehicle are we gonna replace?
Am I correct, Carl, that none?
Yeah, none in the fire department.
That is their, if you want to call it an escrow account,
Okay, so
that is their
Contribution to the motor pool.
contribution to the motor pool fund for the future purchase of a vehicle when it comes up. So
Okay, so we're just setting money aside.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'll see that in just about every department that has a fleet. There'll be a vehicle replacement line item, and there'll be a certain amount that does not reflect what's being purchased. That's reflected in the motor pool budget. We'll
Gotcha.
go over that.
Thank you.
So in Public Works, we had two capital outlays, one for $60,000 for the Rasmus Ingy Bridge, and then $40,000 for the quarry development plan. Carl, you want to talk about this?
Sure. The $60,000 for the Engie Bridge is somewhat of a placeholder. We recognize that the planking on the bridge is failing at a rapid rate, and we unfortunately don't have the money to replace the entire bridge like we want to. So the $60,000 we're putting in the budget to replank the bridge if we don't get grant funding to replace it. We'll talk probably more about that during the capital project discussion. But if this money, if a grant is received for replacement of the bridge, this money will probably be transferred over to the capital project fund and put towards that construction. Worst case scenario is that we replank it because we don't think we're going to get money, and then we do get it, and we're redoing something that we just put money into. But to keep the bridge open and keep it safe, we have to do something. So this is kind of the answer. The $40,000 for the quarry development plan is basically in order to move forward in the quarry with extraction of rock. We need to meet mining safety and health regulations, as well as EPA and DEC stormwater regulations. And we're at a point in the quarry where if we to further develop the Borough's portion of that pit, it's going to be quite a change to the landscape up there. It was a huge change when the airport project came through and we sold 300,000 yards of rock. It was really good because it did resolve a lot of the mining safety and health issues that we had with the quarry. But to move forward, we don't want to just do it haphazardly and put ourselves back in a hole by having a contractor go up there and just shoot what works for them, but not for us in the long run. So this plan, we'll do some surveying, we'll get a good phased out plan of what shots need to happen to get a certain amount of rock out of the quarry that meets all the regulations. We could do without this, but it would be a lot harder to do any planning for long term. If we're looking at developing any sites for a police department or other projects, we need rock, and this is the cheapest way for us to get it. It's with our own material, so that's what that's all about.
Any questions for Carl? The next page, 29, community development. This is this department is comprised of Leo and Susan Christensen with mapping. It's just standard. It's nothing out of the ordinary in this budget. Leo also, the next page on page 31 is his department also. This is where building maintenance staff are funded from. There's also, you'll notice at the bottom under projects, these are, well, Leo, you want to explain what this is?
The 70,000?
Well, all of your,
Under the project.
I was going to talk all the projects. So what happens is before the end of the prior fiscal year, department heads fill out questionnaires of what they'd like fixed in their department, and then building maintenance budgets for these projects in their budget to do during the next year. And then the $70,000 that's for the school alarm.
Yes, the 30,000 is for building repairs, and we're making a real effort to go through all the buildings, survey the damages, and repair, bring things back up as best we can to where they should be. And the 70,000, as Donnie explained, is for replacing the alarm in the gym and school. And I understand when that alarm goes off, sometimes the school has to go into lockdown now. So the school's very supportive of getting this problem fixed. And we'll also have them look at a couple other alarms in town while they're here, which may save a little money.
I can add too, facilities maintenance area is gonna, the concept anyway, is gonna become more important. If in fact, we start to assume that we're gonna get less state funding to just replace buildings, we're gonna have to do a better job taking care of the ones we've got to extend their life. So, you know, the trade-off is, you know, we have to end up probably putting more money in this area over time to make sure that we're doing a better job keeping our existing buildings in shape so they don't deteriorate. We can't afford to let buildings get as bad as the PD and jail got, because the chance of getting funding for it down the road is going to be a lot harder, is the impression.
I just noticed this, and there seems to be a small dollar amount, but vehicle insurance in a number of places has gone down. Have we done something different? It just has gone down?
We've just gotten really good rates in the last little year. That's
I mean, I wish it was a bigger amount of the budget, but.
We'll take every penny.
It never seems to make sense. It'll go down and then it'll go right back up again later, so anyway, we'll take it when we get it.
On page 35 is the community services budget. We're going to be talking with these departments on Friday. So it's the school, the museum, mental health. We're also going to be talking to the hospital too. They haven't requested any money this year, but we need to meet with them once a year. So we thought that would be a good time to do it. So remember this page for Friday. This is the one page that we'll focus on. Page 37 is the library. Kara's not here, but she gave me some good notes. And oh, she does have a representative here. And oh, Aunt's back there. So they budgeted $20,000 for utilities for the new building, and that includes heat. And that was based on 2 different studies, Steve, is that?
As she explained to us, that she talked to all the department heads and got, of the utility funds, and got numbers, and then they had an independent, as part of the project, had an independent person look at it, particularly from the heat standpoint, to say what they anticipated. So, we're going to assume it's close, but I think time will tell.
Is this electric heat?
Yes.
Electric heat?
In-floor heating.
Boilers.
Electric boiler.
And then the increase in professional services was the janitorial and the carpet cleaning annually. And there's a little bump in the operating supplies for janitorial supplies.
What's the increase on the communications for Jody? Did you say?
Yes.
Yes.
Their phone and internet up there, and they're hoping to get an E-rate grant, which the school gets. I believe the school gets back $80,000 a year, if I remember correctly. And the libraries and schools can ask for this grant, and the reason why the library could never do this before is because they were connected to the municipal building and all of the internet came in one place. But it's not a for sure thing. She's hoping that we're going to get it, but we didn't put it in the budget yet because we haven't been notified that we are receiving that.
So, back to your question a little bit. In the past, the library got those same services, but it was piggybacked on our stuff downstairs. So they didn't have to pay for the phone system, didn't have to pay for internet lines and such. Now with the separate building, they will have to. The hope is that this money will be offset by these grants, but again, we can't put the grant in there until we receive notification that we actually got it.
Right, and there's no way that they can capture any part of that extra increase by charging people to sit in there and use internet?
I believe some of the grants she already gets, you cannot charge people to use the library.
It's a
Most libraries
public
don't.
access point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I
Yeah.
just, okay, I have to pay for my internet at home, is all I'm saying. Somebody needs to go to the library and use it for free, that's all.
Yep, many
That's all I'm
people do.
saying.
Yeah.
Sit in that conference room and watch movies all day.
I was gonna say, and actually
Yeah.
worldwide, that's the
Yeah.
case. You can go to libraries, I've been to libraries in Scotland and done it for free. As
I
an
bet you
American.
would've paid, I bet you would've paid $2 or something, you if you needed it. Yeah, I know in Tennecy, I mean, up in Elfin Cove, I know, they have internet service up there, but you have to pay, and it's on an hourly rate.
Really?
Yeah, so if you want to go in there and use it, you just log on with the password they gave you after you give them your cash, and you use it and you get out. You don't sit there and just surf all day long. So, okay, enough said.
Okay, Parks and Rec. Bonnie, is there anything you would like to talk about specifically on your budget? I didn't mark one certain area.
Because there were lots of areas. Well, I would just, do you guys have any questions? Is there anything that's standing out? I mean, there's lots of things that have changed over the last couple of years, mostly just because it's one director to a new director, and the new director is trying to organize the money in such a way that it makes sense to his mind and his staff's mind. And so there are a lot of adjustments as it goes through each line item, but I'd be happy to explain some of those. If you look at, for example, repairs and maintenance, that one went up over last year's repairs and maintenance, and mostly that's because we've budgeted in there $13,000 for the match to the grant that we got to redo the community gym floor. And so that's one reason that one went up. Small tools and equipment is up above what it was last year, mostly because that is for us to actually replace all of our fitness equipment in one of our rooms, because the equipment is actually
Ancient.
very ancient, but we've had some issues with it recently. It's made with wires that are connected to the pieces of equipment that when it takes and you put pressure on it, the wire is so old that we've actually had a snap on a couple of our customers. And we can't find replacement pieces for it because the company is no longer in existence. And so it's one of those things where we just have to make it safe for our customers and also get it replaced. And so that's why that's up a little bit. Any other questions?
But then that would be a one-time.
It would be.
It would
Yep,
take a dip
absolutely.
back down.
Most definitely.
I was just curious on the pool cover, is that your utilities are down? Is that related to that at all, you think, or?
Well, our utilities actually are not down.
Oh,
Compared to last year's, the fiscal year that we're in right now, I budgeted for about $60-some-odd thousand, and expectations that we would be saving a fair amount of money on utilities. That hasn't been the case. Right now, we're looking at hitting 82,000 this year in that fund. The truth is that we know that the pool covers are saving us money because we've had to drop the temperature in the pools. But over the 6-month period in which we've had the pool covers, which was July to December, we've done some pretty specific data mining to try to figure out what's going on. But those 6 months compared to the year previous is 6 months, so July to December comparative 2011 versus 2012, we're actually higher than 2011, even though we have the pool covers. And the only thing that we can really pinpoint it to right now is that the average temperatures in those months in 2012 were actually colder than in 2011. We're still trying to piece it out and figure out exactly what's going on and why that is. We've had an electric engineer, we've had Joe's group out there looking at it. It's kind of a...
disappointing.
Yeah, it really is. But the truth is that I know that we're saving money on it because of the pool. The temperatures are quite a bit down, 2 degrees in one of the pools, 1 degree in the lap pool, and trying to heat that water consistently is a lot of money that's going through it. But there's a lot of other things that go into consideration, whether it be the HVAC system, all the boilers, all those things are all electric. So,
Well, and didn't you say in our meeting that you were trying to parse out exactly where that was coming from?
we are.
They're still exploring some.
Yeah, which is why I even though I raised the amount that I budgeted from last year to this year, I raised it about $10,000 for this year. I'm still hoping that I can find other ways to cut, and so I'm still a little bit blissfully ignorant and going with 75,000 instead of saying 85.
We just can't figure out why.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't be down, and then it's not. And we haven't had much luck locally trying to figure out what's causing it. Maybe one of these other projects, we're gonna come across somebody that's an expert on pumps or something that could go, oh, this is what your problem is. But we have not found them as of yet.
An interesting tidbit is that the school district actually takes care of the utilities for the community gymnasium. We had a gentleman come in and tell us that in the community gymnasium in the hallway, if you put in these specific lights, you will save money. And so we put in all those lights, and the gymnasium looks a lot better, and it's a lot brighter, et cetera, et cetera. But over the same 6 months that I'm talking about, that July to December, their rates also went up compared to 2011. It really, at this point, it's extremely confusing, and I'm just, to be honest, not smart enough to be able to figure it out. But we've been trying to go through the data as much as we possibly can, and Joe's team's probably starting to get frustrated with all of my different emails sent out to him saying, okay, what about this, and what about this, and what about this?
It's job security, huh, Joe?
Yeah.
Well, it is frustrating because I've never had a customer that I couldn't help pin it down to some general area. And in other words, you need to look here.
Yeah.
But over at that pool, since day one, the usage over there has been erratic, to say the least. You cannot predict what it's going to use. And the only thing I can think of, heating water is pretty straightforward. And if you drop the differential between the incoming water and what you have to hold it at, you're obviously going to save money.
Right.
The thing that's a mystery to me is the air handling system and how the building gets rid of excess moisture and things like that. They got some pretty good sized motors over there, 60 horse motors that are moving air, and so that's all I can think of is that that's where it's at, somehow in the controls.
Have you looked for a extension cord plug-in?
Yeah.
It's going off somebody's home.
There is another answer, and that is if you've got an open pool that's warm water, that's a heat reserve. And then when you cover that, you've got to heat
Yes.
the rest of that building. I
Yes.
didn't even think about that
Yes.
before.
Well, yes, except for what we have to do is we actually drop the temperature in the building itself as well.
Okay.
And so the guidelines for a pool and aquatic center is that we actually have to have the outside temperature of the air to match within a degree of the pool itself. And so that's what we have to keep the outside air temperature always at.
Okay.
And so that's what we're doing at this time. And so we've dropped that temperature too, which should be savings as
Yeah.
well.
Okay, it was a great idea.
I'm
though.
sorry, I wish I had a really good answer for you guys on that.
Well, what's frustrating is you have experts that tell you if you do this, your usage will go down.
Yeah.
And we've had it happen twice now, and neither time has it gone down.
How old
So-
are those motors?
As old as the building, which is 2006, 2007, 2006. I
And they run
believe.
constantly?
No, they're actually off all night.
Okay.
And so we don't have to have them running during the evenings when there's nobody there. But it's only during the days.
There's no way of isolating that load, is there?
Isolating which load?
On the motors and see,
Like if there's a vampire draw.
well, yeah, or something, I mean, it seems like if a motor's starting to wear out, it's gonna draw more juice. To
No,
communicate.
if the motors were wearing out and drawing excessive, they would kick out. They would have more problems with them kicking out.
Oh, so the breakers are right at the,
Well, there's a protective device called a heater
Okay.
in the starter itself,
Right.
and so it would protect it.
it's an odd one.
It is, but we will keep on working on it, I promise.
Page 41 is non-departmental. Things such as liability insurance and property insurance for the municipal building, accounting software contract is in here, Granicus, the recording system for the council chambers is in here, alcohol and drug testing is in here. And just a note, we budgeted for the liability and property insurance an increase of 10% in each, just to be conservative. It hopefully won't be that, but and you'll find that in the enterprise funds as well. And the property insurance did go up more than 10% because we had to add the library in with that too, the new library. If you go to the bottom, we have 2 transfers out. We have the harbor fish tax, which Steve already talked about, and then a subsidy of $100,000 to the assisted living fund. And we're hoping by next year we're not going to need that $100,000 subsidy anymore. So, yeah. So that's it for the general fund. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Just one general statement, and this actually filters over to the enterprise funds as well. One of the challenges, and I'll pick on the fire department a little bit, or admin, we have travel and training that crosses lots of different areas where, we spend a lot of money. It's going to be one of those things that we're going to watch really close in future budgets, trying to find ways, because it's one of those costs that it's hard. It's not just the cost of the travel, it's also the cost of having people out of town. And, Petersburg is very well represented on boards. I mean, Leo, you're what, Southeast Conference, and Joe's on Thomas Bay and SEPA, and, I think those are good things. On the other hand, if we have to start making choices on how to save money, it's going to be harder and harder for us to do some of those things, or we'll have to be very picky, about what we do. And fire department's the example of really tough. So is the police department, where we're trying to train people. We're going to have to get smarter about is it cheaper to bring a trainer in than it is to send people out to do it? And again, Sandy and the fire department folks have done a lot of their own training, and we're probably going to have to do a lot more of that going forward to try to find ways to save money in that area. So, anyway, thanks, John.
Okay, the enterprise funds, page 45 is power and light. Now, they're doing a rate study right now. They don't have the numbers back yet, so the revenue does not reflect any future rate increase or decrease or whatever the study might find. And I also want to note, for all the salaries and wages for the city, there was a budgeted 15% increase for health insurance, which, Kathy, did we just find out that it's going to increase?
They anticipated now to be 12 because they kicked out our high claim and said they'd adjust it down. We haven't gotten the official word yet, but through the grapevine it's going to be 12% increase.
Okay, and before the first reading of this budget at the next council meeting, we are going to adjust the salaries and wages for power and light. The IDEW negotiations is coming to an end, we think, and those final numbers aren't reflected in this budget. So,
Of all of our enterprise funds, this one and assisted living are the two that give me the most nightmares. It's not that it's not managed well, because in both cases they're managed very, very well. It's just that while power and light looks really cash rich, try to go, let Joe tell you what it costs to replace a big transformer sometime. It's an area that it doesn't take long before your reserves disappear. And I think, I'm worried about the trend of where we're not covering portions of depreciation, particularly in this area. Again, because the likelihood of getting grants to do that is very small, and the expenses are really, really high. Joe can give you horror stories. What would it cost us if we had to go out to Blind Slough and start replacing turbines on that hydro out there. I mean, so it's an area that we're going to need to keep a close eye on down the road.
I have just a couple quick questions. Because there's such a fluctuation in the electrical connect fee, what happened in FY 10 and 12 through 12 that bumped it up so? That's in the top section.
No.
How much did it go up?
We've done Frederick Point North coming
Yeah,
up.
Yeah, was that Frederick?
Oh, I bet you're right.
Yeah.
I bet you're right. Okay, that makes sense. And then what is interruptible sales?
We previously had interruptible power from SEPA, which was a bargain basement power. And the contract we had was for the pool. And we were able to have that for about 5 years, something like that.
Sounds about right.
And it's basically power that they deemed surplus, and they sold it at a reduced rate, but it's interruptible in the sense that if the surplus goes away, boom, it's gone.
Okay,
So that's what that
okay.
means.
Thank you.
Any other questions or anything, Joe or Sue, that you want to address in your
I just
budget?
like to say that it's, generally speaking, it's, looks very similar to last year. There's no major bumps in the bottom line. There are major shifts in the line items themselves because we're finishing up certain projects, we're moving on to new projects. And so they're line item to line item, yeah, there's some variances. Bottom line is very similar. Our income is going to be relatively flat. We are going to pick up a few more dollars from Ocean Beauty that we did not have last year. We lost that. So we're anticipating some revenue there. We feel like the SEPA rebate is going to be down. You mentioned that it peaked at about $400,000 here a couple of years ago. That rebate is based on how good a year SEPA has, based on their sales and their performance as a company. Well, this last year has been kind of a low water year, unable to sell as many kilowatt hours to Ketchikan as we'd like to, and that's basically where that rebate comes from, is sales of extra or surplus energy to Ketchikan. So we just haven't had the water in the two projects to sell to them, so we anticipate that that's going to be down. We are doing a rate study. The reason that we're doing the rate study is because for the past 3 years, according to the audit, our expenses versus income are in the red. And so, and it appears to be a increasing trend. So we really do need to go through this exercise. The other thing about the rate study is that we need to recognize that our declining block rate, which encourages people to use electricity, is probably outdated, and our rates probably need to be flatter so that we don't encourage or discourage people from using more electricity, because our valuable hydro resource is being close to fully utilized. So for the future, Steve mentioned that we have an aging plant, and we do. Some of the projects that we had, like the 24/9 rebuild, that's coming to an end after about 20 odd years. But I'm going to be testing the poles from Hungerford Hill to town. There's about 90 poles there that we're going to be testing here this summer. And I'm afraid what the tests are going to show me is that I do need to have a pole change-out program, which is very common in the utility industry. The poles are getting close to the end of their lifespan. If you see the ones that got little ferns and stuff growing out the top of them, that's probably a pretty good indication that you need to look at replacement. So I'm not sure just exactly what that'll bring, but we'll probably have, beginning next year, we'll have a pole change-out program. And so there'll be a certain amount every year that we'll spend to change the pole. So, like I say, other than that, it looks pretty flat.
I had a couple things, Joe, on your capital outlays, on page 46. The services and charges went up about almost 40,000 there, is that? And lights and signals, street lights and signals, is that, I was trying to think, is that related to
That's
down
going
Main Street?
when Joe's talking about how it's changing the work that they're doing. It's how, we'll move that, that's when they're going out and, with all the 24/9.
For the last 2-3 years, we've had a lot of work in the area of changing out transformers in residential areas, the bigger ones, because everybody's converting to electric heat.
Oh.
So we had a lot of services, transformers for that type of work. We have to look into this next year and see what type of work we think we're going to be doing and put them in the appropriate line items. So that's a reflection of what work we anticipate doing this next fiscal year.
And the diesel fuel, up 50,000, is that just because of the price, or not, you're not expecting us to be on diesel longer this year?
Strictly price.
And then the Wrangell Thomas Bay net billable increase.
And
Yeah.
that,
We've got,
the bottom line is
no, she's not.
you're talking, I think she's talking about this number.
Right
You're
above
talking
the
about that
red line.
853,000
Yeah,
number?
yeah.
Yeah, how,
Change.
the total cost when we're buying our power is the red number below it.
Okay,
It's
so
the
that's
two numbers
down.
above it added, and so,
Okay.
it's based on, I was just trying to make it more reflect closer to what the expenditures were this past year, which was about, about 70%, 30% split. But
I gotcha.
the red number is really the total.
The total, okay. I think those are my
So,
only questions.
If I may, just because part of your question too, others, which is the whole discussion about funding Thomas Bay.
Mm-hmm.
You see a decrease from 55 to 25, give or take.
Right,
Okay,
I
that
saw
is that is from the Thomas Bay folks in their
Right.
budget. Thomas Bay's going to want an answer, and I believe that's
That's our May
our
6th
next
meeting
Yeah, I think
agenda
so
item. Mhm.
on that. But because there's been some controversy on whether we should pay any of that at all, and that's what we went ahead and did is put the lower number in there, pending the Assembly's decision on how you want to approach that. So, but it's one of your big decisions coming up.
Joe and I are going to talk and catch a can about that a little bit.
We are.
That's all I have. Anything else?
Anything else for electric? No? Okay, moving on to water. I spoke with Chris a little bit today on the water budget, and we're at the first reading of the budget in May. We're going to increase the professional services line item another $3,400 for dam inspections. Chris, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, in the first draft of the budget here, we had $14,000 in there for dam inspections, one for each dam at Cabin Creek and City Creek. And those, we sent out an RFP for those inspections. It came back higher than what the budget was. So instead of 14,000, it came in at 17,400. And so we know that's what it's going to cost. So we're going to bump up the professional services number to reflect that.
How often do you have to have dam inspections?
Every 3 years.
Okay. I don't see any capital outlays this year. Just a lot of ABC loans.
Yes.
So their revenues include, they had a rate study this last year, and so their revenues include that, but if I remember correctly, when you did the rate study, you didn't include to recapture any depreciation, is that right?
Right.
It was just for projects.
Just for projects. That's correct.
So, And the same goes for wastewater and sanitation. And on page 55 is the wastewater budget. There is a capital outlay on page 56 for $24,500. What's that for, Chris?
Let me grab it there. Okay, that is, 5,000 of that is to replace snow plow for our small truck that we use to plow out the wastewater yard, all the hydrants in the wintertime. Plow gets quite a bit of use and it's worn out, so we need to replace that with a new unit. 12,000 is to replace the pumps at the Scow Bay 3 pump station, and those are just, past their service life and need to come out. And then we had $7,500 in there to continue with the pump station 8 grinder pump conversion. These are the pumps up at the Clinkett and Haida subdivision. We've just had a problem with those pumps clogging up with the original pumps that were in that pump station. And so that we started this year. We put in one pump with the grinder conversion on it, and that seems to be helping a lot. So this is just to change out the other pump and finish that process. So that covers that 24.5.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about wastewater for Chris?
Well, the one thing I noted was the increase in repairs and maintenance, the top of that page.
Okay.
Is that anything special or?
There's actually numerous small projects. I could just run through them real quick if you like. Yeah. There's $6,000 in there for pump repairs. That's pulling the pump, the motor, and rebuilding everything. Usually we have 9,000 in there, but since we're replacing pump station 5 this year, we decreased that to 6. There's 3,000 in there to put in a concrete slab in the carport where we keep the trucks and where we store the multi-use body, the flatbed body for our multi-use truck, I should say. We've had a problem with storing that body in the gravel there. When you offload it from the truck, it digs in and it causes it to, the wheels get screwed up, and it's, anyway, we just figured putting concrete in the carport will help that situation, so we won't have to be constantly maintaining the gravel surface where that body is stored. $2,500 is for the replacement garage door for the shop area. That's just a garage door that's worn out and really can't be fixed anymore. $4,500 in there for replacing the screenings conveyor and hopper system. The current system is all rusted out and just past really salvaging. $2,000 in there for grit removal automation, and this is to put in some automatic valves that will eliminate several confined space entries each week. So this is a safety upgrade, so our personnel won't have to enter this grit separator space and actuate valves by hand. Neptune pump station upgrade is in there at $3,500. It's another one that just needs some new equipment. $3,000 in there for digester improvements. Part of that is for safety improvements. There's no ladder coming out of the digester right now. It's a pretty large basin and with very high walls, and if somebody fell in, they really, if they're by themselves at the plant, there's no way for them to get out. So, and then some of that $3,000 is to put in a a skimmer system to recycle some of the scum that we have in the digester that we have no way to really get it out of there right now. And then there's $3,000 in there for a replacement volute for Pump Station 2. The pumps at Pump Station 2 are very old, and we had to change one volute already this budget year, and so we're just budgeting to replace the other one. Try to get a little bit more life out of that.
Lots of repairs and maintenance.
Yep, lots of little things.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
this.
And wastewater has a couple of capital projects for 2 of the pump stations for next year too, so we'll get to those. So the sanitation budget.
And do we know yet about curbside recycling? I remember there was a discussion about that.
No, we don't. We're going to be putting a trial on. I was shooting for May, but it got too convoluted. Yeah, so we're pushing back till June now with that trial, and that'll tell us a lot on what we can do and what we should do in Petersburg as far as changing our recycling program. And but at this time, yes, we're budgeting to continue on with the curbside program as is, with PIA picking it up, and we have a contract with PIA which will be renegotiated if we decide to do something else, because it would be completely unfair to expect them to put a lot more time into a commingled recycling system.
Sure. And have we, and I imagine we haven't, given any thought to out the road collection points for people who live out and away and want to bring stuff in but don't necessarily want to make the trek to town? I bet it'll come up.
Well, we have
It
one at
could.
the harbor, that are the halfway.
But I'm thinking out by Papke's.
Well, we offer service out there right now,
Okay.
and people can sign up for it. The code actually specifies that anybody within our limits has to sign up for collection service of garbage.
I'm referring to people who live on Kupernoff that bring items over, just drop them there without the intention of coming all the way to town.
Right. That will probably come up.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
What kind of a nightmare is that? That
Recommend
recycling,
a camera system.
That's right, that stove.
Notice how my budget has gone down on garbage.
Recycling is one of the, combination of things. Remote dumpsters in any way, shape, or form become a target for things that people can't get rid of otherwise.
Yeah.
Often hazardous, not just the driving, but things that they can't get rid of, and therefore they
Propane
dump it in the
tanks,
first open place they can
batteries,
find. So,
to refrigerators.
yeah.
Oh, see, in Juneau, they just take them out the road and leave them.
Right.
Well, they
That's
do
how-
that here
that's what
too.
we do here, too. That's what we don't want them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's cheap enough, you can just leave it in your front yard.
Hurt.
Okay.
Okay.
Backyard.
You also budgeted $20,000 for machinery and equipment, for sanitation equipment.
Yeah, and that's basically, it's 20,000 that was in this year's budget to work on rebuilding our support structure for our baler conveyor. And basically, that money got spent on some equipment failures that happened this year that were not planned. The largest of which was one of our main garage doors to the baler building failed and had to be replaced. And so instead of being able to work on the conveyor, we ended up fixing other things that failed on us. And so I basically just carried over that 20,000 that we were intending to spend this year on the conveyor and put it in next year's budget, because the conveyor support structure is in very poor shape, and we don't want to wait too long and have a failure on that, because that's a very critical machine, as everybody knows. So that's what that is.
And not to nickel dime you, but that's a big bump in dumpster cans too. On page 59, under supplies.
Dumpsters and cans. It's actually less than
Down from last year.
last year.
But the 3 years before were significantly less.
Yeah. Well, we ended up buying quite a few carts last year.
Okay.
And then this year we were planning to replace actually some public use cans. That $7,000 is basically all of the public use cans on Harbor Way. They're actually really heavy duty type can, and they're all worn out. They're a maintenance headache for our crew constantly, and for the people that are trying to use them. So that's what that $7,000 is
Okay.
this year.
I thought you were correcting the misspelling on the plastic ones.
No. No.
They all say Petersburg.
Yeah. No, that would be a lot of money. We had a program, we were trying to buy 50 of the smaller carts per year, and then we got to a certain level where we had pretty much satisfied the request for that size of can. And so we didn't buy carts for a number of years, but this year we did. So. Another reason for that bump up.
Okay, any more questions for sanitation? Okay, Harbor. This budget reflects their rate increases. They did budget to get a grant, 2 grants for a float and a fish cleaning station. Flo, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we have requests in for a couple of grants, so we submitted applications for those. If they come in, great. If they don't, then we won't spend the money. So.
All right, it's the fish cleaning station. That's the same area as the other one?
South Harbor,
Just to
yeah,
make it
sorry.
Bigger or?
Yeah, at the launch ramp. There's been a request in from the sport fishing charter group for years to make that much more efficient. Right now, we can get one boat, and that's, it's everybody stands and waits in line. So we have a couple of satellite areas in the rest of the harbor for people to come and go tie up, but they have to tie up and then drag their fish down, a whole length of the float. So a lot of times it just doesn't happen. And it's becoming an issue with their sea lions and things like that too. So it's nice to have one spot that we have a headache instead of all these other spots. So anyway, so that's that one. And the troller work float is something that we are taking a portion of the old North Harbor and going to reuse it and try to make a station for the trollers to be able to tie up and lay their trolling poles down. Currently what we do is we drag a old chunk of cement float and raft it up to the end of the utility float or Alcatraz, and they tie up there for a couple of months in the springtime and use it, and then it becomes a huge headache for everybody, so I get screamed at constantly for those 2 months. So then as soon as we can, we drag it away and let the utility float go back to normal. So anyway, it'll be a nice thing if we can get it.
Okay, there's also a couple more capital outlays for outboard and fire pump.
Those are just things, we are on we redo, or we get a new outboard for our skiff, our 50 horse. We try and do it every 5 years or so. We've extended that 2 years, so it's getting to be time that we probably better do it before we start putting more into maintenance. So we actually get a nice little stipend back, $2,500. They're giving us back on a refund, Rocky's Marine, thank you. So they do a nice job for maintaining our stuff for us. And the fire pump, we just, Sandy put in a request. She feels like it's time to start replacing the fire pumps in the harbor. So we pay for that, and she gets to pick out which one she wants.
That's pressure from me.
Hey, Jared, have you given it much thought on what you and I talked about? Bringing the four-wheeler and the pump down from the fire station in a trailer?
There's not a lot of support from the leadership there on that. We'd have to play with it a little bit more. And I'd have to go back and recall what I remember what our conversation was. I'd have to go back and think about some of the comments we had from the group as to the pros and cons to it. In reference to the fire pump here, they were all purchased at one time. And it's been almost 15, do you remember how old they are?
It's been that long, but over 10.
Yeah, and they're, once again, you train up on them and you get them trying to start becomes the big issue when they're stored around salt water. You can't seem to let them sit there for 10 to 15 years and get them to be as dependable as you would like when they're sitting around the saltwater atmosphere. And so what I've been asking Sandy to do, and we transferred to Glow, was that I would like to get these on a rotation so that they don't all need to be replaced in one year. And that's why I put one in, so that we can start a rotation that spreads them out over a period of time. Now, having said that, what you had talked about was relocating it to the fire station and having it where your four-wheeler and your trailer was essentially on a trailer up there that got sent down. And so some of the drawbacks to that is the time it takes. I mean, right now we can have people respond directly to the harbor and get those things deployed and down a finger sometimes prior to the rest of the crew getting there, and then all they got to do is get it started and get it running. Whereas if it's up there, you'd have to, the pickup would have to be there to hook up to it. If it wasn't, you'd have to have somebody with a pickup that could grab it and bring it down, and so there could be some possibilities where you'd have an issue there. And then the other issue is the ability to go down that ramp at an extreme low tide safely with that much weight behind you, without there being an issue of injuring somebody or the guy riding the machine.
I was just trying to figure out how we could save from buying 3 or 4 different pumps on a rotation period. We just had one that was, or 2 that were working well, and you guys were in charge of them, and they were in the warm building up out of the salt water. You know, like we discussed, they're probably future.
It's something to look at,
Yeah,
definitely.
okay.
One of the things that, and it would go into, I think some of the ramps are fine going down at low tide, extreme minus tide, but some of them would have, especially the ones with the 90-degree turn at the bottom, I would have reservations about. Because when you have the pump, the bottles, the hose, and all that gear in there, you got a lot of weight behind that four-wheeler, and a 90-degree turn right at the bottom of the ramp, which could become an issue. And I would be, at 3 in the morning, I'd much rather do it the way we are than have a firefighter piled up down there, wrapped up in a four-wheeler and but I'm not opposed to giving it a try. But there again, you got costs of trailer, and then right now the pickup is, you may have to help me here. It's lives at the fire department, but it doesn't necessarily belong to the fire department, if that makes any sense. It's a Homeland Security pickup that is jointly owned by the police department and fire department. And so, well,
No, it is.
and so if you're going to then have your fire suppression for the entire fleet down there depend on that pump that's up there, then you're going to have a pickup or a vehicle that's pretty much dedicated to it all the time that would be able to tow it down.
Well, and just to remind you too, these pumps are kind of a backup.
Yeah.
And I hope the next one we can build in the city of Kupernoff, because I hope that'll be the Middle Harbor one, which we've got a four-wheeler, all-terrain four-wheel drive, especially purchased on their behalf, because we don't need a four-wheel drive to run around the harbor. We need a four-wheel drive to get up the beach on Kupernoff to fight, say, an Eli Lucas fire, that type of thing.
And one of the other things that I'm working on, and I haven't got it done, is I'm trying to work with the Forest Service and see if they will buy a pump that's exactly like the ones in the harbor for wildland purposes. And that would also, ironically, we would house it in our harbor. And that
We also
that would
have,
help replace
you
another
know,
one.
we also have fire suppression in these new harbors that we're
Yeah.
building there. So there's fire hydrants on each float now. So we're a little bit less reliant on the four-wheeler operation.
Okay.
So do we want to throw good money after bad? My question. $6,000. Because apparently we're not going to buy that in town. So we're not taking any money away from local business.
The harbor pump is kind of a backup system to the one down there. I have been to a boat fire where we charged the system down there and my nozzles plugged up with slush ice. And we ended up having to take the nozzles off and fight it without any nozzle on the end of the hose until they could clear the nozzles. So at certain times in the wintertime, your dry system gets residual water that gets in there from one place or another, and it slushes up. And there's steps you can take to do that, like turning your hose on before you put a nozzle on it, making sure all that stuff clears out. But in that case, so that the pump is for a backup system. When we're talking a $6,000 pump, and the existing system is what we're depending on for our entire fire suppression for the fleet that's tied up down there. So it's any one boat could be a cheap insurance policy when you look at it from the other side of it.
I wanted to ask you about the Forest Service vehicle, because I know a little bit about that. What kind of reception have you gotten from them?
He seemed like it's a possibility. It's one of those deals where I've got to get the right letter typed and sent to him the right proposal. And it seems like every time I sat down to do that, I start doing that and then get sidetracked in something else.
And I guess I would say don't hang your hat on that. One, because their budgets are
Right.
declining, and two, because the Forest Service builds in a replacement cost for every vehicle that makes owning a vehicle ridiculously expensive, and I don't think they have a fire crew station here. So there's not a huge incentive to have it here, and as their budgets continue to decline, things like that are going to be the first. They may buy it one year, and then they would be ready to get rid of it the next.
We were just talking about a fire pump.
Okay.
Not a vehicle.
Oh, I thought you meant on a vehicle.
No,
and I was
no,
going
no,
to say they
just one of these,
are trying to get
one
rid of
of
them
these
because they're
harbor
so
pumps
expensive.
type thing is.
Okay.
And he seemed receptive to that, especially after we had the fire down the Narrows 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it classified as one of the top 5 in several year period.
Yeah.
So.
I misunderstood what you were saying.
Yeah.
That's a whole different deal.
Okay. Flo, I had a question on your utilities increase of 30,000. What are you planning?
Nothing, it's just a reflection of the cost of doing business has gone up kind of crazy this last year. And I think it had to do with a lot of it, we hadn't been getting a bill for the streetlights and things in the parking lots and some of that, and some of the floodlights. So that's what the average is, and we times it by 12, and that's the magic number, so.
Okay. That's all I had. Barbara?
Any other questions for the harbor? Okay, moving on to elderly housing. As you can see in the current year, they received a state grant to replace the roof. And I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about this. Stevie, you want to talk about this? Or the roof is done,
Looks
and
great.
there's extra money left over. And Steve contacted the lobbyist, and there's about $45,000 that's going to be left over. And we wanted to use it for other things like windows or carpet or, and they said, well, no, you can't use this money because you specifically said you were going to use it for the roof. Well, Steve contacted the lobbyist to get it reappropriated and the wording changed, and it looks like it's going to go through. So Sheila can use it for other things.
Yeah, I would like to, the carpets up there are about 20 years old. They were completely saturated for at least probably 5 years on and off with the skylights dripping. That's $20,000 to do that. But March of 1999, if your facility was built before that, you don't have to have ADA compliance, but you have to be showing that you're moving towards that. So we have a senior disability complex with 24 apartments, and every single one you have to step up into the showers. You have to go over an actual bathtub. So we have people that are unable to take showers at this point. There's 2 handicap apartments, and I would love to be able to just take, I've got a line item there for 7,000. I think it was between 7 and 10 was the rough estimate for ADA compliant showers. So I would like to replace for sure 1 and maybe 2 of those just in the handicap apartments. So there's the ones that are in dire need of that. So just be moving towards that.
So we're thinking about on page 68 actually removing the handicap shower, the $7,000,
Yes.
because that $45,000 right below it, the improvements is going to cover that. So in the next, at the first reading, I'm going to take out the $7,000 for that. And then assisted living. Are there any questions about elderly housing? Okay. For the assisted living budget, it looks a little different in the revenues. We're actually itemizing it out a little further because Sheila has so many reports that she has to fill out that it's going to make it easier for us all to be able to fill out those reports by
It used to just be
reporting
like
it this way.
Yeah,
Rent
and
and
services, and now we've got transportation. Medicaid requires you just, it's an awful report. It's going to be due every year. This last year was the first year it was ever due. And so this is going to help me a lot, just to have that breakdown for everything to be current.
And is this revenue, this is for 100% occupancy?
This is for 13 assisted living
So,
apartments and 7
downstairs and then 1 upstairs?
Yeah, and I'm hoping that will change. I mean, I'm hoping we can get more assisted upstairs just because the increase of the revenue is so huge and it's more exciting that way.
Am I correct in saying, Sheila, we've kind of drawn a line on our waiting list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What that referred to is we had people on waiting list in elderly housing, people on a waiting list in assisted living. What we thought was fair was draw a line under that. Any future people that get added to the elderly housing list are being told assisted living has priority. Meaning, if somebody is on the assisted living list and they've only been there a month, and an apartment comes available, they will supersede somebody who's been on the elderly housing for a long period of time. Again, that's only for the people who sign up after that decision. So we kind of grandfathered anybody that was already on the list. So.
And that's actually, with the independent apartments. The assisted
Right.
living.
Thank you.
Yeah. Not to be confused with the other.
Yeah. Did I say that right, Sheila?
Yes.
Okay.
That seems fair and good for the budget.
Well, and the justification is the people that qualify for assisted living are our most vulnerable people.
Right, they don't have any options,
Fewer options.
Such a need. The retirement, the independent wait list is just 2 people, and the assisted, I think we've got 10 on there now on the wait list. So the need is definitely on that side of things.
And that's it for the enterprise funds. I don't think I'm going, we're going to do the motor pool fund, but I wasn't planning on going through every capital project unless there was questions by the assembly on one of the capital projects. The motor pool on page 77 is the list of vehicles we're planning on purchasing next year. Carl, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we've got 3 purchases scheduled for this next year. One is a plow truck, $145,000. This is for a 4-wheel drive plow truck with an integrated sander on the back and a plow. And this will actually take the place, it's a replacement for an existing plow truck that is 2-wheel drive. And we're focusing on this 4-wheel drive version to help us out in some of these areas that we've taken on outside of the former city limits, and will help us out to plow some of those areas that are a little steeper, and we'll have a big enough sander that we can make the rounds and make those roads safe for folks for public safety reasons. And then the Mountain View Manor van, Sheelan and Liz Cabrera at PDC have been working on a grant to replace the existing van with an ADA compliant van. And so the money that the Mountain View Manor has in place in the replacement account is $27,900, and that will be used as a match if the grant comes through. If the grant doesn't come through, then we'll continue to use the van that they have, and there will be no purchase this year. And then we have one other purchase, which is an addition to the fleet. This would be an SUV, mostly used by Public Works Administration. Right now, Public Works uses an F-250 pickup for administrative duties, and it's really not the right vehicle for that. The crew, the Public Works Streets crew, does have a need for an additional pickup, so we would slide this pickup over to that crew, buy an SUV. It would be used for backup to the mail run and daily mail run of the borough. And if any visiting professionals need a car to drive instead of renting a car, they would use this one.
Like the assessor.
What's that?
Like the assessor.
Like the assessor.
Have to beg for a vehicle.
So those are the three purchases this year.
The only question I had was about the heat pump in the shop. Is that panning out at all, or looking good, or?
It's working very well. I guess in the budget you can see the difference in operating supplies. We had $12,800 in there last year. This current year, and we're forecasting a $4,000 expenditure. So that's all fuel, heating fuel that we won't be buying. So $8,000 in fuel that we won't be buying. The utilities line item did go up by $4,000 for the electricity to run the heat pump, but we're offsetting it quite a bit, saving about $4,000 is a projected savings. So
I just wanted to say Joe's crew was nice enough to help us get a separate meter for that heat pump, and we just started tracking it. So we'll have real numbers soon.
Great. Okay.
The next page is the debt service fund. This is, you bring the property tax revenue into the general fund, you transfer out the tax levies for the different bond payments to this fund, and this is the fund that they get paid out of. So just an in and out. And it shows you the maturity dates of each bond, in case you're curious. I don't have the library on there. The library was a 15-year bond, so I'll add that. And capital projects, did anyone have any specific questions? If not, I can skip to the special revenue funds, or any of the department heads, if they have anything they wanted to.
I had one question on the rack project. The Blackberry Point I don't see that. Is that not rack money?
It's not a rack
That's
project.
something else, okay.
Right.
And weren't there funds for Raven's Roost? Or no?
Not in
Ravens Roost Trail.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Yeah. They're, at this point,
I'm looking at the wrong person.
yes.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
that's okay.
At this point, they have some funds that they were supposed to use, but they're still trying to get approval from mental health to actually even have land to be able to travel on.
And
Once
I thought
upon-
I'd heard something recently that sounded like that was going through.
It's getting much
Okay,
closer.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jason, what's Jason?
Anderson.
Thank you. I guess at the last assembly meeting, actually said that they were really close, and so the expectation is that once they get that approval, they'll be able to use some of the funds that they received, which I believe was a RAC project funds that they received quite a few years ago, but that were about to run out. And so they're supposed to be able to use those this summer, as long as they get approval from mental health. But
Well,
that's
Yeah, and there's an add-on to that, we've received word from the federal lobbyist that all future RAC funds may disappear.
Yeah.
That the Forest Service has been asking, they want us to refund timber receipts from prior years to them now. The trade-off seems to be, okay, fine, we will take all the RAC money for the future to not have to come back to communities and ask for that money back. And that's what's being discussed right now in Washington. So,
Is there a possibility of buying supplies but not actually accomplishing the work until? I don't know. I
can't
don't
speak
know the
for-
details
yeah,
of the RAC
I can't
money.
speak for their. The challenge on Raven's Roost has been this ongoing battle between, an immovable object and which between the Forest Service attorneys and mental health attorneys, and Petersburg weighed in, and I think we had it done in about a week. As far as here's our easement, go for it. Between the two, the state agency and the federal agency, it has not been smooth sailing at all. And, they're getting closer.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Any other questions about capital projects?
It's gonna be a busy year.
Yes. Under the special revenue funds, on page 99, these are miscellaneous grants, mainly general fund grants, just little Sandy Beach shelter and bathrooms, the Sons of Norway grant passes through us, hospital, museum. These are just little ones that we track that we don't feel like it's necessary to create a new separate fund. And then the next page, on page 100, is the Economic Development Fund. This is where we pay PEDC out of. And I don't know if everyone noticed I put the request from the community services and the PEDC in the back of the budget in case you were wondering about that, what they're actually doing with the money that they request. We also transfer from the Economic Fund $165,000 every year for water loans that the voters approved in 1999. On page 101 is the Secure Rural Schools funding. We didn't budget to be receiving any for next year. And there may be a one-year extension they're talking now, but you never know, so we didn't put it in the budget. We also budgeted an amount for the school, Secure Rural Schools Fund for the siding for the elementary school. It's not, the grant that they're getting, the Department of Education grant, there's like a 30% match. So we're gonna be using timber receipt money for that 30%. So how it works is you have to spend it and then you request it, from the state in chunks, so. Page 102 is just the property development fund. We didn't budget be using any of those funds this next year. The page 103 is the E911 surcharge fund. That fund is pretty dry right now as we just bought new equipment, but we end up collecting about $30,000 a year, so they'll use those funds to maintain it, the new equipment. And then we also got a Homeland Security grant of $100,000 this last year to help buy the equipment. And then the last page is the new fund. It's the Borough Organizational Fund. This spring, we're supposed to get $300,000, and then next year, $200,000, and then the following year, $100,000, for a total of $600,000. This next year, we're budgeting for the assessment services, to start the comprehensive plan and zoning and mapping, as well as attorney expenses. And also in this budget is $20,000 for signs, new signs all over the borough. So, is there any questions?
Can I comment on the comp plan real quick? I've been in discussions with the borough attorney, and she's determined that we have started the comp plan process because we're doing a lot of mapping and property identification. And so if you hear that, our comp plan is underway and we're following through on it becoming a borough. So I think that's gonna look good on the pre-quiz files. One more thing to check off, we're underway.
Thank you, everybody. I think it was a job well done here.
Jody, can you go over the quick schedule for the approval process now for everyone?
Sure. Well, of course, this Friday we have the meeting at noon with the hospital and school and community services. May 6th will be the first reading for the borough budget. And then we hope to have it approved in third and final reading by June 3rd. Also, what's different, which Kathy and I just found out today is that our property tax mill levy has to be passed by ordinance now as well. And normally we wait until after the Board of Equalization so we know what the total assessed value for the city is, and then we set the mill rate at the following meeting. Well, if we wait until then, we're not going to have enough meetings to pass the mill rate in 3 readings unless 2 of those readings were at the same meeting. So we're actually going to incorporate it into the budget ordinance. It's going to be tentative. I'm going to get as close as possible to what the mill levy is going to be, and then before the third and final reading, I might have to adjust the mill levy slightly, but we'll get it as close as possible.
We do not anticipate the mill rate having to go up other than for the library bond, but we'll know more when we get the Board of Equalization. We expect there to be some challenges, so I'm kind of curious to see how that goes. So.
Right, yeah, if everything stays the same, I budgeted in this next year's budget just to have the increase for the library bond.
Okay, great. You're done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Sue. Yeah, I got to thinking when you were talking about really I wanted you to know too, you know on the Thomas Bay charges, the 2 that what happened is, you know, it's just part of, we pay them a check, but then we code it to what the expenses that we incur for the operation and maintenance, and then otherwise the rest is income. But what I did is I was looking at 6 months, thinking, I want to